Hello. I wanted to come back and discuss the Eventide Ultratap again. I posted a delay. I posted a rat's nest review of this delay probably 10 days ago or so. I was in my annual, coming down with my annual summer cold. You know, the kind of summer cold where it hurts to swallow and your head's swimmy. And so I don't think my examples were particularly good, and I was stumbling over the interface somewhat. Which I think some of it comes from the fact that I use this delay in just a couple of different ways. It's not necessarily my go-to. It fits a specific, a couple of specific niches, I think. Not that somebody couldn't, get adept at it and use it for all kinds of things. But what I use it for is just a couple of things that we can explore. There are plenty of other videos that cover, I think, the whole gamut of the features. So I suggest looking at those. Eventide even has some out there. So I just want to cover a couple of the greatest hits. This is a multi-tap delay, and what that means is we're not talking tap tempo. We are talking multiple taps, like water spigots, and we're actually getting parts of, we're getting the output, we're tapping the output like a faucet from different parts along the delay line. Like I can go from just one tap to just one tap, one tap. Gonna kill the feedback there. To, say, four taps. You hear the four distinct repeats. Now notice that's with no feedback. To more taps. To like 16 taps. To like 64 taps. Now you'll notice in that, the thing is, when we have a single tap, it's at the outer edge of the delay. It's at the longest delay. So when we add taps, we're adding them to the middle. So our delay time gets effectively shorter. Which I think does lead me to two different kind of modes of use. We can always compensate for that. Like if I've got say 64, one thing I could do is just up the delay time, and I could get more of an echo type effect. A couple of the ways I like to use it, really to two distinct ways, and I think that delay time with the more taps fits in. If I just got one or two echoes, I can do kind of a call and response, sort of a cannon in a box, like a few like rounds. Row, row, row. Row, 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 row. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. And the thing is, because I've got row, 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 row your boat gently down the stream. Down the stream. Row, row, row your boat. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. I'm kind of just stacking the notes there. Which is a nice effect. You can kind of do those kinds of call and response, or just dibby-doop. That's I think one of the primary ways I kind of like to use it. And it's a very clean delay. Not that you can't change the tone to get it darker and things, but it's not a modeler. It uses an Eventide, very straight ahead, accurate, precise delay. That you can then add some diffuse, add some things on it to make it a more of an atmospheric delay. It's not hard or brittle, but it's very articulate. That would be one way to use the rounds. The other way I find is that if you crank up the taps a lot, if you crank up the taps a whole bunch, you're getting a lot closer to really almost a pseudo reverb. And it even has in my review video, it even has a pre-delay, so you can get kind of that reverb thing. So if I'm going to do a reverb, I might break down. I'd probably bring down the mix. And then I might bring up the feed. I've got a number of taps. And I might bring up the feedback to give it an even longer decay. Now it's pretty even there, and you can hear, it's pretty even there, and you can hear the individual echoes, which, it's going to happen with that. Like one thing, in some of the very early analog solid state analog reverb effects were multi-tap delays. But one thing with even taps, that's not really how reverb tends to work, where you get multiple different delay times. They're not evenly in delay spaces as reflections happen off reflections in a diffusion. That's what we generally call it. So I could change the spread with this delay and get from to something where the delay times don't really necessarily match up. And there's even what they call a slurm effect, which is kind of really helpful. This is really about creating the diffusion, so you can give it much more diffusion. So we're getting a lot more in that reverb type space. And I may want to crank up the feedback again to get a sort of longer decay time. See, now we're getting much more into the reverb, pseudo reverb territory. But notice you get sort of a very defined reverb in terms of the dynamics and stuff. It's not just the wash of a room. You start getting into things like this. That's a lot more straight reverby, I think, with its own character. But you can, change the taper and get kind of more reverse effects. So there's a number of things you can do from that standpoint that I find really useful from this little box. Is really those two general uses. You've got tone control to darken the reverb and things, and there's a chopper effect. Actually, that's one thing I would let's take a look at real quick. Let's go ahead and bring it down to back to something sort of vanilla. Something like that. Give it a little more. Okay. So we're in there somewhere. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to engage the chop effect, which is just going to give you a slicer type effect. There we go. It's a lot more of a slicer type effect now. And, again, you can add that in kind of the reverb type system too, but it gets let's get some feedback on there too. You can hear how it's giving you, it's essentially adding a chop or a slicer or just a volume effect onto the delays to give it, just another sense of dynamics. Like right there. That would be that'd be much heavier, a square wave slicer type of effect, which I'm now going to turn on, and now we're back to kind of a smooth. Which brings me to, I think, I'm not going to say it's a completely unique feature, but that I think is a really useful feature is by pressing the active button here, the actual bypass button, let me kill that. Sorry, it's hard to hear when it's that. I'm using the bypass button. If I press that down, that lights up. And what I can choose is I can choose between latching, your normal kind of echo on, press for the echo off. Notice the tails are going, which is really useful. Or I can set it for momentary. And I really like that because it almost works like a sostenuto pedal, like you can just sustain certain things. And you hear that sometimes in the studio. We would love you to join us for a bite. What is it? I can't sing. We would love you to join us for a bite. There was that worked better with a little. 407 years ago, our founding fathers wanted a party. That kind of thing, where you've just got something behind you, just a single phrase, something like that. And you can use that, just to kind of get a single phrase going, or if you've got kind of a sound you just kind of want to ring ring through, but just a single sound. And not that you can't do it by press on, press off, but it doesn't, I find that interface is a little hard as opposed to just holding it down to whatever you want, you know, it's where you can more precisely kind of find your spot, that kind of thing. And so I really, really, really like that, you know, and you can just kind of ride that almost like a sustain pedal sort of, and just sort of add things. You'll hear a little, you know, you hear that, that's because of my microphone. You're just hearing the acoustic thing. You put it on the floor, you're not going to hear that. You know, and it's neat because it's almost, I think the chopper kind of reminds me of that, because if I want to, I can just chop things up, so it's real weird. You know, just by choosing the kind of rhythmically or arrhythmically. I'll even put a little feedback on that so we get a little more sustained thing about what I'm talking about, and almost make a sound collage out of, you know, that stuff however we want it to do. You know, and that's a neat feature. So I'm trying some editing. Anyway, that's really pretty much what I wanted to just talk to you about. It's an interesting little pedal that I think fits a certain niche that, you know, has some interesting things. It feels very Eventide to me, but enjoy.